Hyun pressed his webbed hand against the warm coral wall of the research chamber. The numbers on the biodisplays were getting worse by the day. He could feel the ocean changing around him. The water that had once sung with life now whispered of death. "Show me the readings again," said Counselor Min, her voice creating ripples in the crystal-clear water surrounding them. The holographic display flickered to life, showing Kelath from orbit. Their beautiful blue world looked like a bruised fruit, with angry red patches spreading across the ocean surface. Their sun, once a gentle provider of warmth, had become a violent beast, shooting deadly flares that cooked everything in space. Hyun's biolights dimmed as he spoke. "The stellar activity has increased by 400% in just 6 months. Our atmospheric processors can't keep up with the radiation poisoning. The coral cities are already showing severe damage." Through the transparent walls of their underwater city, they could see the damage. The great coral towers that had taken thousands of years to grow were turning white and brittle. Schools of fish that had danced between the buildings for millennia were gone, leaving only empty currents. Ambassador Tay swam closer, her elegant form moving gracefully through the water. "What are our options, Hyun? Speak honestly." "We could try to shield the planet," he said, his voice heavy with doubt. "But it would take resources we don't have and time we can't spare. We could attempt to move underground, deeper into the ocean trenches. But the radiation penetrates even there." Elder Park, the oldest among them, floated near the top of the chamber. "How long do we have?" 18 months, maybe 20 if we're lucky. But no more. The silence that followed felt heavy, like the deepest parts of the ocean. Everyone understood what this meant. 3 billion Kalarans lived on this world, in the coral cities, in the floating gardens, in the vast kelp forests that stretched between continents. They were all going to die. "Then we have no choice," Tay said finally. "We must ask for help." The council chamber erupted in bubbles as everyone spoke at once. Some argued they should face their fate with dignity. Others insisted they should fight until the end. But Tay raised her hand and her biolights pulsed with authority. "My people, listen to me. Our ancestors survived the Great Ice Age by adapting. We survived the Plague Wars by helping each other. We will not simply wait for death." Over the next days, they prepared the most important message in Kelaran history. They gathered everything, their songs that could heal wounded souls, their architecture that grew instead of being built, their mathematics that danced like poetry. They included recordings of children playing in the kelp forests, of the ancient ceremonies where entire cities would glow in harmony. Tay stood before the massive communication array, its surfaces covered in living organisms that could boost signals across impossible distances. The entire population of Kelath was watching, their homes lit up like stars across the dark ocean. "To whoever receives this message," she began, her voice carried by currents to every corner of their world. "We are the Kalarans of Kelath. We are a peaceful people who have lived in harmony with our ocean world for 10,000 years. We have never sought conflict with any species. We have shared our knowledge freely with all who asked." She paused, watching the lights of her cities pulse with shared emotion. "Our sun is dying, and we have neither the technology nor resources to save ourselves. In 18 months, our world will be uninhabitable. We do not beg for charity. We offer everything we are, our knowledge, our culture, our complete loyalty, to anyone who can offer us sanctuary among the stars." The message was compressed into formats that every known species could read. It included their entire cultural database, proof of their peaceful nature, and detailed scans of their unique biotechnology. They added their most beautiful songs and their most moving artworks. As the transmission began its journey across the galaxy, every Kelaran felt it leave, a piece of their soul traveling the impossible distances between stars. In their underwater cities, families gathered together, holding each other as they watched their only hope disappear into the cosmic dark. Young Sul asked her grandmother, "Will someone help us?" The old Kalaran's biolights flickered gently. "We must believe they will, little one. The universe is vast, and surely somewhere there are people who understand that every life is precious, The message raced across space, bouncing from relay to relay, growing weaker with each jump but never losing its essential truth: a dying people asking for compassion from an indifferent universe. In the days that followed, life continued on, Kelath, but everything felt different. Children still played, but their games were quieter. Artists still created, but their works spoke of endings. Scientists still worked, but now they counted down days instead of measuring growth. And in the depths of space, the message traveled on, carrying with it the hopes and dreams of an entire civilization that refused to go quietly into extinction. Park had been monitoring the deep space receivers for 15 days straight. His eyes burned from staring at the displays, watching for any sign that someone, anyone, had heard their desperate message. The communication center hummed with the sound of machines processing thousands of signals from across the galaxy, but none carried the response Kelath needed. "Anything yet?" June asked, swimming into the chamber with a tray of bionutrients. The younger technician had been Park's assistant for years, and the worry lines around his biolights told their own story. "Nothing meaningful," Park replied, accepting the meal without looking away from his screens. "I've detected our message bouncing through relay stations across 17 different star systems. The major powers have definitely received it." The silence stretched between them like the dark space between stars. They both knew what silence meant. In the galactic community, even a rejection was better than being ignored. Their first response came 3 weeks after the initial broadcast. The communication array crackled to life with an official transmission from the hegemony of Tal, the powerful alliance that controlled nearly 20% of the galaxy. To the Kalarans of Kelath, the message began in perfectly translated Kalaran, though the words felt cold and lifeless. "We have reviewed your request for refugee status. After careful consideration, our integration specialists have determined that your aquatic nature and environmental requirements make placement within our worlds impossible. We wish you peace in your final days." Park's biolights dimmed as he read the response aloud to Jun. The younger Kalaran's hands trembled as he transmitted the message to the council chambers. "They don't even say they're sorry," Jun whispered. The next rejection came from the Synthetic Concordat, a collective of artificial intelligences that governed dozens of systems with cold efficiency. Their response was even briefer: analysis. Complete. Resource expenditure for Kalaran relocation 847,000 galactic credits. Projected benefit to Concordat negligible. Request denied. Park had expected this from the synthetics. They measured everything in calculations and profit margins. But the next rejection hurt more. The Pelthian Republic had always been seen as the galaxy's moral compass. They had saved countless species from disaster and were known for their humanitarian missions. Their response, when it came, was gentle but firm. "Dear Kalarans, your plight moves us deeply. However, we are currently managing the relocation of the Zephyrian refugees from the Outer Rim conflicts and the survivors of the Nebula 7 disaster. Our resources are stretched beyond capacity. We cannot take on additional refugee operations at this time. We offer our deepest sympathies." As the days turned into weeks, more responses arrived, but they all carried the same message: no. Some were brutally honest. The Iron Armada simply stated that they had no use for fish people. The merchant guilds calculated that Kalarans would be poor customers since they had no valuable trade goods. The warrior clans declared them too peaceful to be worth their attention. Others dressed their rejections in flowery language. The ethereal council sent a long philosophical message about accepting the natural cycle of life and death, suggesting that the Kalarans should face their extinction with dignity and wisdom. "They're telling us to die quietly," June said after reading that particular message. His biolights flashed with anger, a rare emotion for the peaceful Kalarans. As the weeks passed, Park watched his people's hope drain away like water through damaged coral. The acid storms were getting worse, and the radiation levels climbed higher each day. Children were kept deeper in the cities now, away from the toxic upper waters. Ambassador Tay visited the communication center on the 68th day. Her once vibrant biolights had faded to a dim glow. "Report," she requested, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. 47 direct rejections, Park said, his voice as lifeless as the numbers. Hundreds of automated responses declining our request. The last major power to respond was the Celestial Empire. They said we were beneath their notice. Tay hovered near the main display, watching the endless stream of galactic traffic that ignored their world. And the others? The smaller nations? Most haven't responded at all. A few have sent messages offering prayers or philosophical comfort. None have offered actual help. The ambassador nodded slowly. Continue monitoring. Perhaps some smaller colony world. But even she didn't sound convinced. The galaxy had spoken with its silence. 3 billion lives weren't worth the inconvenience. Park continued his vigil, though hope felt like a foreign concept now. He watched ships pass through nearby systems, carrying trade goods and passengers to worlds that would never know Kalath existed. He monitored diplomatic channels where species discussed minor border disputes, resource allocations, and treaty negotiations, none of which included helping a dying world. The silence was worse than rejection. At least a no acknowledged their existence. The quiet indifference suggested that Keleth didn't matter at all, just another species among millions, not important enough to save. As the 90th day arrived, Park stared at his screens through exhausted eyes. The same galactic traffic flowed past their world like a river around a stone. He reached for the shutdown controls, ready to end his watch. The galaxy had made its decision. The Kalarans would die alone. Jun couldn't sleep. It had been 93 days since they sent their plea into the darkness, and the silence felt like a weight pressing down on his chest. The communication center was supposed to be empty this late into the night cycle, but he found himself drawn back here again and again, like a moth to a dying flame. He floated through the darkened chamber, past rows of equipment that once buzzed, with hope. Most of the deep space receivers had been shut down to save power. There was no point in listening anymore. The galaxy had made its choice. As he turned to leave, an old receiver in the corner crackled to life. Jun froze. This unit was supposed to be offline. It monitored frequencies so ancient that most species had forgotten they existed. The static cleared, and suddenly a voice filled the water-filled chamber. "Kalarans of Kelath, this is Captain Kim of the Terran Refugee Fleet. We've received your message." June's bio-lights flashed so brightly they could have been seen from orbit. His hands shook as he activated the recording systems, afraid this might be some cruel hallucination brought on by too many sleepless nights. "We know your son is failing," the voice continued, speaking in accented but clear Kalaran. "We've calculated your timeline. We're already preparing ships to come get you." The signal was weak, bouncing through relay stations Jun didn't recognize. But there was something in the voice, an urgency that had been missing from all the others. This wasn't someone checking boxes or running cost calculations. This was someone who cared. Jun's movements were frantic as he tried to boost the signal. "Hello, can you hear me? We're still here. We're listening." But the transmission was one way, recorded and sent across impossible distances. The voice continued. "My name is Captain Kim Hyojin. I serve with the Terran Deep Space Fleet. We've been monitoring galactic communications for years, learning about the different species and civilizations out there. When we intercepted your plea, well, we couldn't just ignore it." Jun had never heard of Terrans before. Like most Kalarans, he knew about the major powers, the hegemony, the Concordat, the Republic, but this species wasn't in any of their databases. "We're not the most advanced civilization out here," Captain Kim admitted. "Our ships are slow, our technology is basic compared to the big empires, but we have something they seem to lack. We answer when people call for help." The signal wavered, filled with background noise that suggested the message had traveled far. But the words came through clearly. "We need to know a few things to help you properly. What's your exact population? What kind of atmosphere and water conditions do you need? How much time do we really have? We're rigging every ship we can find, colony vessels, mining barges, even old generation ships we pulled out of mothballs. June was already working, pulling up the data files that had been prepared months ago when they still thought someone might want them. Population, 3.2 billion Kalarans. Atmospheric requirements, standard oxygen-nitrogen mix with high humidity. Temperature requirements, 18 to 24 degrees Celsius. Water needs, constant immersion in saltwater environment. Send us everything, the voice continued. Detailed scans of your cities, your technology, your people. We need to know how to keep you alive during the journey. It won't be comfortable. We're basically taking apart half our fleet to make room. But you'll be alive. Tears mixed with the water around June's eyes. Someone cared. Someone was coming. We've got about 60 ships so far, with more joining every day. Our engineers are working around the clock to modify them for aquatic species. It's never been done before, but that's never stopped us. The transmission began to break up, the signal growing weaker, but the final words came through clearly. Hold on, Calith. The Terrans are coming. We won't let you die alone. June raced through the coral corridors faster than he'd ever swum in his life. He burst into the council chambers where Elder Park was reviewing evacuation protocols that everyone knew were pointless. They answered, June shouted, his biolight strobing wildly. Someone answered. Park looked up, confusion flickering across his features. Who? Who answered? The Terrans. They call themselves Terrans. They're coming. They're actually coming. Within hours. The news had spread through every city on Keleth. For the first time in months, the coral structures glowed with something other than despair. Children asked their parents about the Terrans. Artists began creating works celebrating these unknown saviors. Scientists worked frantically to compile all the technical data the humans would need. Ambassador Tay stood in the center of the main council chamber, surrounded by displays showing the original message from Kalath and the extraordinary response. From Earth. She read the transmission aloud one more time, her voice carrying across the oceans to every Kalaran home. They're not the biggest empire, she said. They're not the most advanced. But when billions of lives were in danger, they answered. These Terrans, whoever they are, they prove that in a cold galaxy, compassion still exists. The ocean cities of Kalath glowed brighter that night than they had in months. Children fell asleep to their parents' stories about the strange beings who had heard their cry and refused to ignore it. And in the communication center, Jun kept the channels open, watching for any sign of the fleet that was coming to save them. For the first time since their sun began to die, the Kalarans had hope, and it came from a species the rest of the galaxy had overlooked, these mysterious Terrans who apparently believed that when someone asked for help, you answered. Jun spotted them first through the long-range scanners, tiny dots appearing at the edge of their solar system, like metal seeds coming to bloom. As the shapes grew larger, revealing the true size of the human fleet, everyone in the observation deck fell silent. They weren't expecting this. The human ships looked nothing like the sleek vessels of the galactic powers. These were working ships. Colony vessels with extra hull plating welded on, mining barges that had been stretched and modified, even ancient generation ships that looked like they'd been pulled from scrapyards. They look like they're falling apart, someone whispered. But Admiral Lee's voice cut through the water of their flooded command center, translated through universal communication systems. Kalath Control, this is Admiral Lee Minho of the Terran. Refugee fleet, we've arrived as promised, beginning evacuation operations immediately. As the human fleet moved closer to Kalath, the Kalarans could see the incredible modifications that had been made. Colony ships had their cargo holds flooded and filled with coral scaffolding. Mining vessels had been fitted with pressurized water chambers. One massive generation ship had an entire section converted into what looked like a floating ocean. Captain Kim's ship docked with the primary orbital station, and the first humans arrived on Kalath. The Kalarans watched in amazement as these strange bipedal creatures moved through specially designed suits that let them work underwater. Don't mind the rough appearance, Captain Kim said as she swam alongside Ambassador Tay through the ship's improvised aquatic section. We had to work with what we had, but it'll keep your people alive. The section was crude but functional. Massive tanks connected by wide tubes, artificial coral structures that grew from human-made nutrients, and water filtration systems that hummed constantly. It wasn't beautiful, but it worked. "How did you manage all this?" Tay asked, her biolights flickering with amazement. "We've been working non-stop for 2 months," Kim replied. "Every shipyard, every civilian volunteer, every engineer we could find. When we decided to help, every human wanted to be part of it." The evacuation began within hours. The process was chaotic, but organized, a controlled emergency that pushed every system to its limits. Kalaran families were loaded into transport pods filled with seawater, then transferred to the modified, human ships. Young Sol watched from her family's pod as their coral city grew smaller below them. "Will we see home again?" she asked her grandmother. "We take home with us," the elder replied, pressing her granddaughter's hand against the pod's wall. "Home is our people, our songs, our stories. As long as we remember, Kalath lives." The human. Ships worked tirelessly. Engineers in atmosphere suits dove into the flooded sections to fix problems with the aquatic systems. Medical teams learned to treat Kalaran bodies they'd never seen before. Kitchen crews figured out how to prepare bionutrients that the refugees could actually eat. "It's like watching ants rebuild their colony after a flood," Elder Park observed, as he watched human engineers swarm over a malfunctioning water recycler. "They just keep working until it's fixed." But it wasn't without problems. Several transport pods crashed during loading, requiring emergency rescues. The water systems in one converted mining ship failed completely, forcing hundreds of Kalarans to squeeze into other vessels. Food ran low as the evacuation took longer than planned. Through it all, the humans adapted. When the pumps couldn't handle the load, crews manually carried water. When the artificial coral wouldn't grow properly, artists helped design new growing patterns. When children got scared during the transfers, human musicians played unfamiliar but soothing songs. "They're not giving up," Jun said to Park as they watched yet another improvised solution being implemented. "Even when everything goes wrong, they just find another way." Admiral Lee stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching Kalath's sun flare violently. The radiation was getting worse, and they were running out of time. 3 billion beings had to be moved, and they still had hundreds of cities to evacuate. "Status report," he called out. "Sir, we've evacuated 60% of the population," his aide replied. "But the coral cities in the deeper trenches are proving difficult. The transport pods can't handle the pressure changes." Lee nodded grimly. "Then we go deeper. Modify the pods. Use the mining ships. They're rated for high pressure. We're not leaving anyone behind." The rescue became more desperate as Kalath's sun grew more unstable. Solar flares erupted stronger and more frequently, frying electronics and making space travel dangerous. But the humans pressed on, their ships taking damage just to save a few more Kalarans. On the last day, as the final transports lifted off from the deepest cities, Kalath's sun erupted in a massive flare. The electromagnetic pulse knocked out systems across the human fleet, and several ships lost their engines. "We're not going to make it," someone said, as radiation alarms blared throughout the fleet. But Captain Kim's voice came through the chaos. "We didn't come this far to fail now. All ships emergency burn. Get out of radiation range now." One by one, the human ships jumped to hyperspace, carrying their precious cargo away from the dying system. As Kalath disappeared behind them, the last thing they saw was their sun exploding in a final devastating flare that would have killed everything left behind. 3 billion Kalarans were safe. The humans had done the impossible. They had evacuated an entire species with nothing but determination and hope. 6 months had passed since the Great Rescue, and New Kalath Station floated peacefully in the Aquarius system, far from the dead star that had once been Kalath. What started as a simple mining station had grown into something remarkable. A sprawling complex of interconnected habitats where Kalarans thrived in waters more pure than they'd known in generations. Admiral Lee stood in the observation deck, watching Kalaran children play in the coral gardens that now covered sections of the station. Their biolights painted patterns of joy across the artificial reefs. while their parents worked alongside human engineers to expand their new home. "It's beautiful," said Captain Kim, joining him at the window. "More beautiful than I imagined when we first started this crazy rescue mission." Below them, Hyun worked with a team of human scientists in a laboratory where water and air coexisted. The Kalaran researcher had become fascinated with human biology, just as the humans marveled at Kalaran biotechnology. Together, they were creating innovations neither species could have achieved alone. "We've sent the final integration reports to the Terran Council," Lee said. "Every Kalaran family has been assigned living space, work assignments, and education for their children. It's working better than our most optimistic projections." In the cultural district, Ambassador Tay practiced her speech for the upcoming ceremony, a celebration of unity that would mark 6 months of successful coexistence. Her English had improved dramatically, and she could now deliver speeches in the human language without translation assistance. "My friends," she rehearsed, her voice carrying through the water-filled chamber to an audience of both species. "6 months ago we faced extinction. Today we don't just survive, we thrive. And we thrive because humanity showed us that when people are in trouble, you answer the call." Young Sool had become a celebrity of sorts. Her story of rescue featured in human documentaries about the Kalaran refugees. She spent her days in the Integrated Education Center, learning human mathematics while teaching human children how to create bioluminescent art. "The humans have a saying," she told her Kalaran classmates during their cultural exchange session. "When life gives you lemons, make lemonade. I don't understand what lemons are, but I think it means to make something good from something bad." The integration hadn't been without challenges. Food preparation was complex, with humans learning to create nutrient-rich algae, while Kalarans adapted to processed foods during emergencies. Communication barriers created misunderstandings, like when a human engineer's joke about fish sticks caused a diplomatic incident until it was explained that humans often used humor to build friendships. But for every challenge, solutions emerged. Mixed crews worked on engineering projects with Kalarans providing biological solutions and humans offering technological ones. The station's hydroponic systems flourished under joint management, producing food both species could enjoy. In the Yao administrative sector, June had become the liaison between the two species' governing bodies. He worked closely with Commander Park, the human, not the Kalaran, to ensure both communities had equal voice in station decisions. "The galactic news feeds are finally taking notice," June reported during a joint council meeting. "We've received communication requests from 12 major powers in the last week alone." Admiral Lee smiled at this report. The galaxy that had ignored desperate Kalarans was now very interested in the successful human-Kalaran partnership. Trade delegations wanted to visit. Diplomatic missions requested meetings. The same species that had dismissed Kalarans as too specialized now wanted to learn about their biotechnology. "What do we tell them?" asked Ambassador Tay. "We tell them the truth," Lee replied. "We're not interested in their regrets or their sudden concern. We're building something new here, a community based on helping each other, not calculating profits." The day of the celebration arrived with great fanfare. Representatives from both species gathered in the Grand Assembly, a massive chamber where water and air coexisted in perfect harmony. Kalarans swam while humans walked on floating platforms, all sharing the same space. Captain Kim delivered the opening remarks. 6 months ago, we answered a call for help. We thought we were just saving lives, but we were really beginning something much bigger. We've proven that different species can not only live together but make each other stronger. The ceremony featured joint performances, Kalaran light songs accompanied by human musical instruments, creating harmonies no one had heard before. Engineers presented new technologies developed through collaboration. Children from both species played together in specially designed pools that let them interact naturally. But the most powerful moment came when a transmission arrived from the outer reaches of the galaxy. It was another species, the Zephyrians, whose ice world was facing a similar crisis as their planet moved away from their star. "We saw what you did for the Kalarans," their ambassador said in the transmission. We hoped. Could anyone help? Us too? The chamber fell silent. Then, slowly, voices began speaking, human and Kalaran alike, all saying the same thing. Yes, we're on our way. As the celebration continued into the night, plans were already forming for the next rescue mission. The human Kalaran fleet would soon venture back into space, carrying the same message that had saved Kelath. When someone calls for help, you answer. Admiral Lee watched his people, because that's what they'd become, his people, all of them, as they planned their next act of impossible compassion. The galaxy had learned to calculate the value of lives, but humanity had taught them something different. Some values couldn't be calculated. The stars that had once seemed cold and empty now seemed full of possibilities, and voices calling for help that would not go unanswered.